Northeastern Colorado, 1852. As the morning sun begins to burn the dew off the prairie grass that surrounds them, two Cheyenne war chiefs prepare to make an attack on a village of their hated enemy, the Pawnee. One man, the war chief named Black Kettle, carries a bundle of arrows, blessed by a Cheyenne medicine man and tied to the end of his long lance. The other, a man named Long Chin, wears the sacred medicine hat, also blessed by a medicine man. These items are not only of great spiritual importance to their tribe, they believe they are critical elements in surviving and winning the fight that is soon to come. In the tradition of the Cheyenne, no attack must be made until the men carrying these sacred items first take to the field. If this happens, they believe their attack could be compromised, and they could very well all likely be killed. In fact, the war between the Pawnee and the Cheyenne has been greatly flamed in the past decade after an 1842 battle in which the Pawnee had captured the bundle of sacred arrows. This defeat was seen as an unimaginable, nearly irreparable tragedy by the Cheyenne. Though one of the arrows would eventually be recaptured by their Lakota allies, the Cheyenne had spent much of the 1840s in a state of societal disarray, seemingly afflicted by all manner of tragedies. They had used the single recaptured arrow in a ceremony to make another bundle of sacred arrows, even trekking deep into the Black Hills in order to place two of the arrows deep within a crevice, in the hopes that this offering might rekindle some of their medicine. But at first, this had largely seemed like it had been to no avail, as tragedy continued to plague the Cheyenne people. In 1849, as thousands of Americans flooded through the area on their way to California in order to capitalize on the ongoing gold rush, thousands of Plains Tribes people became infected with deadly cholera. The Cheyenne and their Lakota allies' territory were those closest to the gold rush pioneers' main route of travel. Thus, they were even more exposed to the epidemic than many of their Plains Tribes counterparts. The resulting few years have proven devastating to both tribes, as countless thousands have succumbed to the disease, perishing in horrific circumstances, leaving countless orphans, widows, and widowers in their wake. Time and again, travelers would report entire Cheyenne villages completely deserted, with most of their inhabitants having been lost to cholera, and the rest having fled to the hills in a desperate attempt to escape the mysterious, unseen plague that was seemingly wiping their people from the earth. However, in the last few years, the Cheyenne have begun to rise to power again. Black Kettle and his family had managed to survive the epidemic, and his leadership and selflessness had driven his rise to prominence amongst his people. He had earned his reputation not only through his deeds in battle, but his foresight and his prudence. In 1850, he had moved his people to the Arkansas River and sent the call out for any and all surviving Cheyenne bands to join him and his people so that they might be strengthened in their numbers and begin to rebuild their people. In 1851, he had participated in the signing of the Treaty of Fort Laramie, which solidified a truce between the Cheyenne and their close ally the Arapaho and the U.S. government. In return for what amounted to a lease on the Cheyenne's buffalo hunting grounds, the U.S. government would cede control of the lands ranging from the Rocky Mountains to the plains lying roughly 300 miles to the east. Bolstered by this official recognition, Black Kettle had arranged an alliance between the Cheyenne and not only their longtime allies in the Arapaho and the Lakota, but with the Kiowa and the Apache as well. They had then taken to the warpath against the Pawnee in the summer of 1852, wreaking havoc on their mutual enemy and attempting to drive them out of this territory for good. But despite the success of their campaign, the Pawnee have, as of yet, still not been driven from what the Cheyenne hold to be their rightful territory. And thus, the Cheyenne warriors now gathered around Black Kettle still burn for vengeance and glory against their hated enemy. The warriors, in keeping with the Cheyenne tradition, are all dressed and ready for battle, and all atop horses painted with specific, personalized patterns, also intended to bring them fortune and favor in the battle to come. But several of the Cheyenne warriors are missing. Most notably among them, another war chief by the name of Big Head. But with time now of the utmost essence, the two chiefs now lead their forces out of their encampment and over the nearby hills, towards the Pawnee village their scouts have discovered only a few days prior. As they reach the village, Black Kettle checks the sinew tether which attaches the medicine arrows to his lance. He breathes a sigh of relief, assured they are snugly in place. He then looks at the faces of the men around him, many of them likely lost in the memories of past conflicts with the Pawnee and in the retribution they seek to gain. Though they are all ready, willing, and capable warriors, the absence of several of their men, as well as the war chief Big Head, begins to weigh on him more and more heavily. With every passing mile in their approach to their target, the missing Cheyenne warriors become a growing concern. Had they abandoned their kinsmen? Had they simply chosen not to heed the call of battle? Or, perhaps the worst option, were they acting preemptively and attacking the Pawnee village already? If this was in fact the case, not only would the Cheyennes' element of surprise be lost, but the power of their medicine would be destroyed. Black Kettle and Long Chin, however, push these thoughts away and continue on their quiet, doggedly deliberate ride approaching the Pawnee. Finally, they reach the hill that overlooks the Pawnee village, and, looking down upon it, they are shocked by what they see. While there are many lodges, fire pits, and even drying buffalo hides all about the site, there are, seemingly, no Pawnee. This is undoubtedly an unsettling development for all, perhaps most so for the war chiefs in charge of the medicine. For all of them, the situation at hand now poses two immediate questions. One, if the Pawnee are not here in their village, where are they? And two, have the warriors missing from their own party waged a preemptive attack, driving the Pawnee into the hills and breaking the power of the Cheyennes' medicine? Black Kettle and his cohorts do not have time to wait long for their answers to these questions. Within a few minutes, the missing war chief Big Head and his warriors are seen riding towards them. As they near Black Kettle and Long Chin's position, the two chiefs are horrified to realize that Big Head is, in fact, holding a freshly taken scalp, still dripping wet with gore. Though normally this would be an occasion for great celebration amongst the Cheyenne, in this situation it means only one painfully obvious thing. There has indeed been a preemptive attack on the Pawnee, perpetrated by Big Head and his followers. Now, their medicine has been broken, and the protection they believe it affords them has been greatly compromised. But now it is too late to call off the attack, as these warriors have traveled far to claim their trophies and glory. Amongst them, retreat will not be seen as prudence, but cowardice. Thus, Black Kettle, Long Chin, and the warriors under their command now follow Big Head as he leads them towards the site where the Pawnee have retreated to. For his part, Big Head is now all but certain that victory will be assured, and the Pawnee have been weakened from the initial attack. However, after a short ride over the nearby hilltop, he is quickly proven wrong. In his force's brief absence, the Pawnee have hurriedly dug out firing pits from which to hunker down and defend their position from the Cheyenne charges. Now, what was supposed to be a surprise attack in the early hours of the dawn has turned into facing down an entrenched enemy position under the sweltering afternoon sun. With no other option, the Cheyenne, their forces now united, spend the following hours making head-on charge after head-on charge, attempting to break the Pawnees' defenses. But, time and again, they are repeatedly beaten back by the Pawnee bullets and arrows. As the battle unfolds, several Cheyenne warriors retreat to the original site of the Pawnee village, setting fire to all of the lodges in order to deny the Pawnee any shelter or foodstuffs should any of them survive this day. But, as they are carrying out this task, one of the Cheyenne warriors suddenly spots a large group of native riders approaching, coming directly towards them. At first, they are unable to identify them. Then, suddenly, as the party rides to within 100 yards, they are able to ascertain that this group is, in fact, composed of warriors from the Potawatomi tribe, an ally of the Pawnee. Coming to the aid of the Pawnee, this party shoots down several of the Cheyenne, setting fire to the village, before hurriedly riding on, following the Cheyenne trail to their current position. They flank the Cheyenne's position, taking them by surprise and driving them from the field of battle, killing several more of the Cheyenne in the process. As the Cheyenne retreat, all among them, most notably Black Kettle and Long Chin, are rife with anger and resentment at the actions of Big Head. His vainglory has, they all believe, cost them the glory of victory and cost several of their warriors their lives. The Cheyenne camp, only hours before a place of great excitement and ballyhoo, now resounds with the wailing of newly widowed Cheyenne women who know that their husbands' bodies are, perhaps at this very moment, suffering the degradations and mutilations wrought upon all slain enemies in Plains warfare. To add insult to injury, it seems to many among them that their attempts to rekindle their sacred medicine have failed them yet again. Many direct their ire towards Big Head, while others find themselves simply lost in fear and sorrow. It seems that, yet again, the future of their people has been cast into uncertainty. But while this is not the end for the Cheyenne, nor the end for Chief Black Kettle, their struggles will continue on for decades. Throughout the 1850s, not only will conflict with the Pawnee continue, but the United States government will progressively do less and less in order to honor their agreement in the Fort Laramie Treaty. Despite continuous protests on behalf of the Cheyenne, American expansion into their territories will continue, reaching its peak in 1859 with the onset of Colorado's Pikes Peak Gold Rush. Many of the Cheyenne warrior societies would meet this expansion with continued brutal raiding on the encroaching settlers. However, Black Kettle, an ardent pragmatist, argued for a cessation to the violence and further cooperation with government officials. But his acquiescence would ultimately prove a pivotal element in what history views as likely his and his own people's greatest tragedy, the Sand Creek Massacre of 1861, in which federal troops, under the command of Colonel John Chivington, brutally attacked Black Kettle's village, killing the legendary chief and dozens of Cheyenne men, women, and children in the process. By many accounts, it is said that Black Kettle flew the American flag given to him on an official visit to Washington, D.C. outside of his teepee, in hopes that it would signal to the soldiers that his village was in fact allied with and allegiant to the United States. But this would prove to be to no avail, as Chivington's men carried out one of the most ruthless, inhumane actions in American military history. While the Cheyenne would be virtually decimated by this tragedy, their story would not end with the atrocities of Sand Creek. And while Black Kettle would ultimately meet his end there, being remembered as one of the most influential chiefs in the history of his people, the stories of his many exploits and efforts to sustain the life of his people are too numerous to cover in one sitting. And thus, the many stories of the Cheyenne people and their revered chief, Black Kettle, are, for tonight, other stories for other times. Northern Montana, 1835. As a group of Crow warriors under the command of the great war chief Constant Bird make their way back to their village, every man among them nervously scans the surrounding landscape, looking for any sign of their dreaded enemy, the Blackfoot. Suddenly, one of the warriors cocks his head slightly over his shoulder. At first, he is unsure of what he hears, but then he hears it clearly. The rumbling sound coming from the hooves of approaching horses. His stomach drops. He now looks upon the faces of his fellow Crow warriors and sees that they have heard the sound too. This can mean only one thing. The Blackfoot are coming. Moments later, the Blackfoot appear. A massive war party, hundreds strong, their weapons raised high and their faces twisted in rage. Constant Bird, despite his rank as chief, has no idea whether to order his warriors to flee or to make a stand. But it makes little difference, as the Blackfoot are soon upon them, slaughtering the Crow warriors wholesale with their superior numbers and firepower. A frightful scene of close-quarters combat unfolds, with Constant Bird and his warriors being swarmed upon and unhorsed or simply shot dead. Individual fights unfold, with Crow warriors armed with clubs, knives, and tomahawks fighting to the bitter end, only to be overtaken, killed, and quickly mutilated via scalping and other degradations routine to frontier warfare. The hatred between the Crow and the Blackfoot, even at this time in the early 1830s, is long-standing and incredibly deep. But this is no random attack. This is Blackfoot revenge, plain and simple. Earlier in the day, it was in fact the Crow warriors who had been planning an attack on the Blackfoot's village. They had come upon a sizable encampment in the wee hours of the morning and had hoped to make their own surprise attack. But they had been quickly discovered by Blackfoot lookouts. The Crow had instead decided to feign a desire for truce. Under the direction of Chief Constant Bird, they had approached the village under overtures of peace, stating that they had come to speak under official capacity for the entire Crow nation and to seek an end to hostilities with the Blackfoot. Not wanting to spoil any chance to end this long and costly conflict between the two peoples, the Blackfoot had actually acquiesced to the notion of peace talks. They had invited Constant Bird and his warriors to come into their camp and to smoke a pipe of peace with them in a show of good faith. The Crow had readily obliged, and were soon enjoying puffs of strong tobacco seated next to their avowed enemies. And the Crows soon made their way out of camp under the auspices that they would take the news of this new peace back to their people. But while this seemingly amicable meeting unfolded, one of the Blackfoot had managed to steal a bag belonging to one of the Crow warriors. The Blackfoot had not been entirely fooled by the Crow's ruse and had remained dubious of their longtime enemy's actual intentions. When the Blackfoot examined the contents of the bag, they were both shocked and enraged to find the scalp of a warrior who had gone missing a few days before. This warrior, whose name has been lost to history, had ventured out hunting alone. He did not know that Constant Bird and his band of Crow had been prowling the inner ranges of Blackfoot territory for a few days now, on the hunt for any small parties of Blackfoot. This lone hunter had presented an irresistible target for the Crow, and he had been run down and summarily killed. The warrior who had slain him had proudly taken his trophy in the tradition of plains warfare by harvesting the man's scalp. This was a major victory, as the Crows have suffered greatly in the preceding months and years with consistent losses to the Blackfoot. The legendary mountain man and fur trapper James Beckworth has spent the previous few years living with the Crow, and has remarked in his journals of the consistently hard luck that the Crow warriors have had when they take to the warpath against the Blackfoot. Recounting his time with the Crow during this summer and fall, Beckworth writes that, quote, "We went into winter quarters under the Wind River Mountain and at the mouth of Long Grass Creek. While we were encamped there, numerous small parties of Crow went to war without leave, and in almost every instance were defeated. On some excursions, they were entirely destroyed." Several of the high functionaries inquired of me as to what cause I attributed such disasters. I answered as follows. "Warriors, the causes are clear enough. My medicine tells me the causes. Firstly, you robbed my white friends, stealing their horses away and even attempting to take their lives when they were under my protection, and when you knew it grieved my heart to have wronged them. A second cause, you were continually acting contrary to the wishes of our Puash, who went to the Spirit Land on account of your disobedience. I have also expressed the same wishes to you, telling you to apply yourselves to collecting skins, in order that you have the wherewith to purchase the things that you need. These, my orders, are openly disobeyed, and the Great Spirit is very angry with the nation for their thieving and disregard of the orders their head chief has given them." End quote. It might seem strange that Beckworth, a former slave himself, would admonish the Crow for their stealing from his, quote, "white friends." But this is a clear example of the truly multicultural life of Beckworth, a longtime veteran of the frontier, and a longtime ally to the Crow, known among them as Bloody Arm for his fighting prowess. But aside from the fact that many of the fur trappers, white and otherwise, were dear friends of Beckworth, the Crow's thievery proved detrimental to the fur trade business, and thus detrimental to Beckworth's profits. Seeking to remedy this, he gave his prescription for the Crows to remedy their seemingly constant problems, quoting again from Beckworth's account. They then inquired what they should do to appease the wrath of the Great Spirit. I answered again, "Warriors, to appease the just anger of the Great Spirit, you must discontinue your war parties and remain peaceably at home for 1 moon. You can then prepare for a great sacrifice and do penance for that time, and let the Great Spirit see that you really repent the evil you have committed. By acting so, you may recover the favor which the Great Spirit has evidently withdrawn from you. By continuing in your obstinate ways, you will assuredly be rubbed out as a nation." End quote. But Beckworth had no specific instructions on exactly how or what to sacrifice. And, most importantly for the Crow, it did not seem to be effective. Thus, it might be said that Constant Bird's decision to lead a band of warriors into Blackfoot territory in search of gore and glory might have been a regrettable misjudgment. The conflict between these two people has roots that are generations old, and driven by an inextricable cycle of vengeance consisting of continuous raiding and counter-raiding. The original cause of their conflict lies in their dispute over the rich hunting grounds of the northern plains. Here, on the vast expanses of prairie, survival was determined by successful buffalo hunts. This drove countless intertribal conflicts, as different tribes battled it out for control of the best hunting territories. In recent years, it has been the Blackfoot, a large, powerful, and warlike tribe who has staked their claim as the preeminent power in what is the modern-day state of Montana, as well as southern Alberta, Canada. But the Crow have fought long and hard to stake out their homelands, and despite continual difficulties in their campaigns against the Blackfoot, they have shown no signs of giving in so far. They have time and again proven fearless, relentless, and ruthless in their war against the Blackfoot. But now, Constant Bird and his warriors are caught in a fight for their very lives, the glory they sought proving to be the cause of their demise. The battle unfolds with a manic ferocity, with the Blackfoot's bloodlust seeming to grow with every crow they cut down. Soon, Constant Bird and the 39 other Crow warriors with him lie still in death on the open prairie, their bodies scalped and mutilated. The Blackfoot, assured that they have taken their vengeance, now head back to their village in order to both mourn their fallen comrade and to celebrate their great victory. And though history does not record the identity of the unfortunate slain Blackfoot man, unless he was a chief, the warriors would be anxious to lay claim to his possessions as well. For it is a custom amongst the Blackfoot that, unless the dead warrior is a chief who was generous during his lifetime, his belongings can be divided up amongst the rest of the tribe. With his immediate family caught in the throes of mourning their loved one, the dead man's friends and fellow warriors would lay claim to his best horses and his best weapons. However, if he was a magnanimous leader, custom dictated a quite different ceremony. The inside of his lodge would be carefully cleaned and arranged, and the dead man dressed in his finest regalia. His family would paint scenes of his greatest deeds on his shield, and gather his finest horses, also decked out in their finest riding tack. The deceased would then be set upright inside of the lodge with his shield and facing the door. Then, the horses would have been gathered up and led one by one to the door of the lodge, where a family member would press a pistol against their head and kill the animal with a single shot. This process would be repeated for each horse, sometimes dozens of animals, with the horses being left where they fell. The man's widow would then cut her hair short, put on tattered old clothes, and smear her hair, face, arms, and clothing with white clay. And, as with many Plains tribes, various forms of self-mutilation might also be carried out. Back at the Crow village, when Constant Bird and his warriors fail to return, a similar scene unfolds, with women and men alike wailing and moaning, with many cutting their hair short. Some even cut the manes and tails of their horses short in efforts to express the depth of their seemingly inconsolable grief. James Beckworth, who was in the camp as this unfolded, noted that he, quote, became sickened with their constant mourning, which was kept up throughout the whole village, day and night, end quote. Scenes like this, in both the Blackfoot and Crow villages, would unfold countless times in the coming years as what history will come to know as the Blackfoot-Crow Wars continued to intensify. However, both tribes have already begun to fight the hidden enemy that will soon kill more of them than any enemy tribe ever has: the infectious diseases of the encroaching American settlers. Smallpox and cholera have killed many on the northern plains already, even in the early 1830s. And in the succeeding decades, tribes all over the plains will continue to feel the devastating effects of a plague they cannot see and do not understand. For his part, James Beckworth will go on to live with the Crow until 1837. He will be adopted into the tribe, marry a Crow woman, take part in battles, and even reportedly rise to the rank of a war chief. In the 1840s, he will move west to California, where he will discover what is known as Beckworth Pass, a lower, more navigable pass through the Sierra Nevada mountains than had previously been known of. In the 1850s, he will author his autobiography, The Life and Adventures of James P. Beckworth, an invaluable, though at times exaggerated, account of his career on the frontier. He will briefly serve as a scout for the U.S. Army, and even an Indian Affairs agent, before finally retiring and eventually passing away on October 29, 1866 in Denver, Colorado, known as a frontier legend and one of the greatest mountain men of all time. But the countless tales of adventure and hardship from the life of James Beckworth, as well as the innumerable battles that took place during the Blackfoot-Crow War, are, for tonight, other stories for other times. Southwestern Oklahoma, 1833. In the warm light of the early morning sun, a young Kiowa boy heads out of his village, situated on the idyllic open plains that lie near a small range of rolling, rocky hills. This is a chore the boy does every morning, one, even in his young age, that he does dutifully and without prompting. As many young men do during such chores, his mind often wanders to his future as a warrior, and of all the great deeds he hopes to accomplish, all of the enemies he hopes to engage and defeat. It is this daydreaming that leads him to briefly second-guess what he sees moving several yards away. But suddenly, much to his horror, he realizes that what he is seeing is, in fact, real. It is the sight of several Osage warriors, longtime blood enemies of the Kiowa, slowly skulking their way towards the Kiowa's camp. After shaking off his disbelief, the boy immediately breaks from his herd of horses, riding his own pony hard and fast back towards the camp, hoping to warn his people. But the Kiowa village, normally replete with skilled, experienced warriors, is, at the moment, nearly defenseless. Many of their warriors are out on the war trail, themselves raiding on another long-time enemy, the Ute tribe. Many more are hunting the vast buffalo herds that, at this time in the 1830s, still virtually carpet the plains in herds many thousands strong. Their chief, an experienced warrior named Islandman, has acquiesced to his warriors' dual desires to gain glory on the warpath and in the buffalo hunt, and has thus left his village virtually bereft of all fighting-age men. The Osage are all too aware of this fact, as they have been following the Kiowa for days prior to this, as they made their way to this spot under the assumption that they would be safe for the summer. Chief Islandman has assumed that this spot will provide a respite from the enemy raiding that so often harangues his people, as well as a suitable location for their most sacred of religious ceremonies, the annual sun dance. But the chief has been gravely mistaken. Now, as the women, children, and elderly men of the village hear the warning cries of the young boy approaching the village, many among them simply scatter in sheer panic. There is no time to mount any kind of defense, and, even if there was, there are no warriors on hand to mount a fight. The approaching Osage warriors, now seeing the entirety of the village devolve into terror and chaos, are greatly heartened by this development. They have traveled far, over many miles and many days, with little in the way of food and water, and even less in the way of warm campfires and restful sleep. But they have patiently waited and watched as the Kiowa warriors have left the camp to raid or to hunt, and now they are even more confident that they have chosen the perfect time to strike. Though there is a long-standing enmity between the tribes, their conflict is not without cause. The ongoing war between the two tribes has originated from the same cause as the vast majority of intertribal warfare on the continent: the sheer scarcity of resources. Even for peoples replete with knowledge of survival in these harsh environs, the fight to secure a consistent source of food and shelter is one that presents a very real life-and-death struggle for every tribe. For tribes on or even near the Great Plains, it was the American bison, colloquially known as the buffalo, that provided food and shelter. The meat of even one of these hulking animals could provide a village with hundreds of pounds of meat. Their hides could be used to construct lodges, clothing, and even boats. Even their organs, sinew, and bones were used to make everything from storage containers to rawhide sinew to tools. But even the seemingly innumerable bison herds presented an ever-present problem for the tribes: the question of who among them held the rightful claim to the lands which these herds most inhabited. The conflict over these valuable lands led to countless instances of raiding and counter-raiding between the tribes. Some of this warfare merely had the intent of driving their enemy from their hunting grounds, but some was conducted with the express end goal of eliminating their foe altogether. Though the Kiowa and the Osage have fought for decades over these lands, both tribes are relatively recent arrivals in the area. The Kiowa are believed to have originated near British Columbia, Canada, having migrated west and then southwest over many decades through the territories of Idaho, Montana, Kansas, and then finally to Oklahoma. In terms of numbers, they are in fact a relatively small tribe, numbering only several thousand total tribal members at their peak. But their culture is one of great depth and complexity, with a highly developed set of societal rules and a deeply held, inexorably complex theology that revolved around a set of seasonal rituals. In fact, the Kiowa have all been anticipating their upcoming Sundance, a ritual common amongst several Plains tribes, in which the warriors pierced the skin of their chests and then tethered themselves by that skin to a central pole in the middle of a large lodge or clearing. For hours or even days, the warriors would then dance, sing, and even swing from the pole with the full weight of their bodies in an effort to gain cosmic favor with their gods and to display their strength, courage, and endurance. The Kiowa's enemies, the Osage, are a larger tribe and a veritable powerhouse in the Midwest of North America. Unlike the Kiowa and other tribes who make their homes exclusively on the undulating grasslands of the Great Plains, the Osage are a semi-agricultural, semi-itinerant people who make their homes in the woodlands of Missouri and Arkansas. However, in the warmer months, many of the tribe venture out onto the southern plains in order to hunt buffalo. Their history of warring with neighboring tribes is long, legendary, and well known all across the plains. Early explorers Lewis and Clark even made a note of the unshakable belligerence of the Osage towards any and all perceived enemies. From the Cherokee to the Comanche to early European settlers to the Kiowa, the Osage have not hesitated to take on any and all challengers in the brutal arena of frontier warfare. Their feud with the Kiowa is one that has spanned decades, as what began as a territorial war has now devolved into an out-and-out blood feud, one in which both peoples are now caught in a seemingly inextricable cycle of violence and retribution. This cycle is one that has seen countless members of each tribe, men, women, and children alike, fall under the bullets, arrows, knives, and spears of their opposition. While raiding for horses or honor could often result in less mortal confrontations, the struggle for hunting grounds and the desire for vengeance often bore witness to some of the most vicious, untoward warfare of the 19th century. This warfare did not resemble the Napoleonic warfare of their European contemporaries, but focused on guerrilla tactics and pragmatism. The time to strike an enemy's village is when it was devoid of any able-bodied warriors, just like the Kiowa here at Cutthroat Gap now are. Now, as the Osage warriors make their approach towards the Kiowa village, and the panicked villagers attempt to draw back their bowstrings with shaking hands, the Osage feel assured that they have indeed picked the opportune time to strike. As they sprint towards their prey, they let loose an initial volley of arrows and bullets, cutting down several Kiowa at once. The few men in camp who are able to mount a defense do so gallantly, displaying great courage in the face of impossible odds in an effort to defend their families. Sadly, for nearly every one of them, their efforts will prove to be in vain, as they all soon fall to the Osage. Seeing their only defense now quashed, the panic of the Kiowa women and children now reaches a fever pitch, with some in such disarray that they flee towards the Osage warriors and are quickly cut down themselves. However, many other acts of great courage now take place as the Kiowa fight for survival against the Osage raiders. As the remaining Kiowa flee the village, they make their way towards nearby Elk Creek. One father runs with his infant son, carrying the child with his breechcloth clenched firmly between his teeth, only setting him down intermittently to launch arrows at the pursuing Osage. One young mother also flees toward the creek, with her infant child strapped to her back on a board and dragging her toddler daughter by the hand. An Osage warrior managed to cut the women and children off before they can cross the river, but is quickly fought off by the desperate mother, who manages to steal away with her young children, all of whom manage to survive the attack. Another young mother manages to fight off an Osage warrior with a tomahawk, also managing to cross the river with her young children and get to safety. A lone Pawnee warrior, a guest in the Kiowa camp, makes a staunch defense of his own, striking down several Osage warriors and defending the retreat of the women and children. Most of the surviving Kiowa now flee east after crossing the creek, convening a few miles away amidst the prairie hills. One Kiowa, though, an elder in the village, manages to make his way down Elk Creek, heading south in order to reach another nearby Kiowa village. After a harrowing trek, all the while on the lookout for Osage pursuers, he reaches the camp and alerts their warriors to the attack. In mere minutes, a large party of Kiowa warriors is mounted and takes to the trail, in hopes of providing relief to their fellow tribesmen. But as they crest the hill overlooking the village, they are met with a truly horrifying sight. All of the Osage attackers have vacated the village, disappearing into the hills, and, in their wake, they have left a macabre scene of unfathomable slaughter. The bodies of the slain Kiowa, young and elderly alike, lie strewn about the camp, scalped and mutilated. Several of the bodies also lie headless, and as the Kiowa warriors further inspect the camp, they are horrified to find the missing heads stuffed into cooking pots. Though several of the Kiowa have managed to escape, 2 young children, a boy named Thunder and a girl named White Weasel, have been kidnapped by the Osage. Though White Weasel will eventually be reunited with her family in 1834, Thunder will soon pass away in captivity. Also taken are dozens of horses, the primary form of wealth and currency here on the plains. In short, what the Osage have wrought upon the Kiowa is nothing short of utter destruction. Upon his return to his camp, Chief Islandman will face widespread condemnation, eventually being forced to resign from his position. Though history will come to know the place where this massacre took place as the Cutthroat Gap, the event itself would be known forevermore to the Kiowa people as the summer they cut their heads off. Though the war with the Osage will carry on for many years, the Kiowa will never again make camp at the site of this massacre. While the story of the massacre at Cutthroat Gap is among the most brutal accounts of intertribal warfare on the North American continent, it is but one example of the ongoing cycle of attack and retribution between rival tribes that carried on for centuries. But the many stories of those accounts are, for tonight, other stories for other times. Alberta, Canada, October 25, 1870. Just as the sun crests the horizon on another chilly autumn morning, 2 young families in a small camp near the Belly River are just beginning to wake. Suddenly, the still morning air is broken by the horrifying sound of muffled, hurried footsteps approaching the 2 lodges. For a sickening few seconds, this sends a collective chill down the spines of the young fathers, mothers, and children ensconced inside their warm buffalo hide lodges. Scarcely a few moments later, the blinding light of the morning sun pours into the family's lodges as the walls of their teepees are slit open by the attacking Cree warriors, the longtime bitter enemy of the Blackfoot, who swarm into the family's shelters, swiftly dispatching every unfortunate Blackfoot inside, regardless of age or gender. The unfortunate victims are scarcely able to utter a sound before their lives are mercilessly snuffed out at the end of Cree war clubs, knives, and lances. However chaotic, ruthless, and bloody this scene may be, it is seen by the attacking Cree warriors as just retribution. Many among the young warriors are alight with pride and glee. However, several among the attacking party now begin to grow more and more weary about a premonition shared by one of their most respected chiefs less than 24 hours ago. The day prior, the Cree war party had gathered in the middle of the Albertan plains, with several dozen warriors standing in a semicircle around the revered Cree war chief Piapo. Chief Piapo had had a dream, and the dream had given him great concern about proceeding. As the impatient party of young warriors stood skeptically listening to his recounting of the dream, he beseeched them to proceed no further on this raid. He proclaimed that he had seen a giant buffalo with iron horns, and that this buffalo was attacking the entire camp, mauling and killing them wholesale. Piapo is now greatly concerned. But while dreams and visions do indeed hold great sway within the Cree tribe, this does not mean that all visions are created equal, nor that all are to be taken seriously. This party of bellicose young men, regardless of their respect for a veteran war chief, had remained resolutely intent on exacting their revenge for horses stolen and family members killed. The Cree now move on to another group of Blackfoot camped near the river who are all asleep in their teepees in assumed safety. Several Cree warriors stealthily slip within arrow range downwind of these lodges and ruthlessly dispatch the few pet dogs who themselves are just beginning to wake in the morning light. Yet another horrific scene begins to unfold as the Cree descend upon the small encampment. Believing this to be the main Blackfoot contingent, no effort is made to conceal their arrival, nor to muffle their weaponry. Within seconds, the air is filled with the sounds of war cries, gun smoke, and rifle fire. These lodges of the Blackfoot are again slit open, and again the inhabitants within are ruthlessly cut down. But this time, several Blackfoot manage to flee towards the river. Several are shot down, but more manage to escape over the low rolling hills. As the Cree move on to complete the grim task of finishing off any wounded Blackfoot and looting the camp of any valuables, they pay little consideration to the Blackfoot who have managed to get away. Here on the open prairie, in the freezing cold, they assume the survivors, having fled without blankets or weapons, will ultimately die from exposure to the elements. But the Cree are wrong. These small encampments of Blackfoot families are, in fact, only outliers of a massive Blackfoot village, hundreds of warriors strong, who have now been alerted to the Cree's actions, and are now themselves on the warpath for revenge. This camp represents a coalition of bands known as the Blackfoot Confederacy, made up of the Siksika, the Kainai, the Northern and Southern Piegan, and, added recently at this point in the 1870s, the Sarsi and Gros Ventre. The most powerful tribe here on the northern plains, the Blackfoot have long dominated the area, and in doing so, have developed a long-standing enmity with many neighboring tribes, none more so than the Cree. The Cree have also formed a conglomeration of bands known as the Iron Confederacy, comprised of the Plains Cree, the Woods Cree, the Saulteaux, the Assiniboine, the Métis, and the Haudenosaunee. They trace their tribal origins to the James Bay area between present-day Ontario and Quebec, on the southern tip of the Hudson Bay. With the incursion of the European fur trade in the 16th century, the Cree were pushed west onto the plains. It had seemed that conflict with the Blackfoot was all but unavoidable, and, to be sure, it had been. The rivalry between the Blackfoot and the Cree is one born, like many intertribal conflicts, out of a scarcity of land and resources. For centuries, the two peoples have conducted these raids against one another in the fight to secure hunting grounds, to uphold tribal honor, and to exact their retribution in what seems to be an inexorable cycle of violence and vengeance. The Blackfoot, being the larger tribe, had often gotten the better of these clashes, and now they will seek to bring to bear the full might of their forces in defending their village and in punishing their attackers. Back at the site of their second attack, as the Cree pour through the spoils of their raid, several among them suddenly stop, stand fully upright, and listen intently. Somewhere, not far beyond the ridges that line the Belly River, hoofbeats are rapidly approaching their position. The cry suddenly goes out amongst the victorious Cree that more Blackfoot are now on the way. From where, they do not know, but every man among them now scrambles to his weapons and makes ready to fight. In mere minutes, the small river valley is suddenly flooded with hundreds of horse-bound Blackfoot warriors, all descending upon the Cree position at full speed. The Cree, now suddenly on the defensive, take whatever cover they can in the bottom of the valley near the river, and then hunker down in order to make a desperate bid for their own lives. For hours, a vicious close-quarters fight unfolds as the Blackfoot seek to ensure that not a single transgressing Cree warrior survives. Time and again, Blackfoot warriors charge the Cree position, pouring arrows and bullets in among them, killing dozens. Finally, with all hope seemingly lost, many of the Cree attempt to swim across the Belly River to at least put the body of water between themselves and their attackers. But these warriors are quickly spotted by a half-blooded Blackfoot scout named Jerry Potts. Potts had been born in 1840 inside Montana's Fort McKenzie, the only son of a Cree mother and a Scottish fur trader father. After his father's death when he was still a young boy, his mother had rejoined the Cree and given custody of the young Potts to Alexander Harvey of the American Fur Company. Sadly, Harvey had turned out to be a cruel caretaker, eventually abandoning Potts in 1845. Later that same year, Potts had been adopted by a kindly fur trapper, also from the American Fur Company, a man named Andrew Dawson. After spending his formative years under Dawson's care, Potts would eventually rejoin his mother with the Cree tribe. Here, he would complete all of their rites of passage, becoming a full-fledged member of the tribe, though he still preferred to clothe himself in mostly European garb. However, Potts had gone on to marry 2 Blackfoot women and had many children within the tribe. By 1870, he had been made a chief in the Kainai Band and had amassed a considerable fortune as well as a respected reputation during his time with the tribe. Potts now alerts his Blackfoot comrades to the attempted escape, and he and the rest of the Blackfoot warriors descend upon the Cree in the river like a pack of wolves upon a wounded bison. Now, much like the unfortunate Blackfoot whom the Cree had killed while they attempted to slog their way through the river to safety, the Cree themselves are now slaughtered wholesale along the banks of the river. In his later account of the battle, Potts recalled the Cree being so thickly gathered upon the riverbanks that one could, quote, close their eyes and pull the trigger and still manage to dispatch them one by one. Only a few dozen Cree, out of the 100-strong attacking force, managed to escape the charnel house of the steep river banks, now fleeing onto the expanses of the open Albertan prairie. A large force of Blackfoot, loath to let any of their aggressors escape, now immediately take to pursuing the remaining Cree, who are making their way in a dead sprint towards a sparse, small thicket of brush. The majority of these warriors are cut down before reaching the relative cover of the thicket. As their comrades fall to the left and to the right of them, the few surviving Cree who manage to make it to the thicket now hunker down as the horrifying spectacle of a cyclonic Blackfoot attack seemingly engulfs them from all angles. Finally, though, seeing that there are so few Cree left, the Blackfoot eventually take their leave, heading back to their grieving village and to the bodies of the vanquished. They stop at the corpse of each freshly slain Cree in order to claim their rightful trophies of war in the way of usable goods, trinkets, and scalps. The bodies are then summarily and thoroughly mutilated in order to further punish their attackers. Back at the river, the water now runs red with the blood of both Cree and Blackfoot, an immediate, visceral reminder of the horrors that have just occurred. The stench of death permeates the small valley, and the cries of grieving Blackfoot women fill the air. Though confrontations like this one have gone on for decades, if not centuries, between the tribes of the Canadian Plains, this fight, known to history as the Battle of Belly River, will go down in history as the largest and the last intertribal battle in Canadian history. In 1871, the year following the battle, a treaty will be struck between the Blackfoot and the Cree, officially ending the ongoing war between the two tribes. The tribes of the Northern Plains lived in an unforgiving reality, where resources were finite and territory was everything. And thus, as is universally the case with the human condition, conflicts inevitably arose. But the many tales of the hundreds, if not thousands of intertribal battles that occurred on the Great Plains of North America are, for tonight, other stories for other times. Wyoming, 1866. From atop a high butte, a small band of 23 Crow warriors is fighting for their lives in a pitched battle against their longtime enemies, the Shoshone. The Crow are low on bullets and arrows and can plainly see the area at the base of the butte swarming with hundreds of Shoshone warriors. This battle has raged now for nearly 5 straight days, and now it is clear to the Crow warriors that this will be their last stand. Still, they fight on, intent on causing as much damage to their enemy as possible. Below them, the Shoshone warriors, now sensing victory to be within sight, cautiously advance up the steep incline leading to the top of the butte. As the attack reaches its apex, war cries and death songs resound in the air. Warriors on both sides begin to fall, crying out in shrieks of pain as the battle continues unabated. This scene is one that has been carried out many times between these avowed enemies, as the fight over land and resources has engendered a deep hatred between these two peoples. The Crow have held for many decades that they are, in fact, the rightful owners of the territory comprising what will become southwestern Wyoming. Conversely, the Shoshone hold that this territory comprises the northeasterly reaches of their rightful lands. While the intensity of the conflict has waxed and waned over the years, with intermittent truces being called, seemingly always followed, eventually, by hostilities being declared again. The instance that had led to this current deadly fight unfolding now on the butte had taken place 5 days earlier, when the two parties had come into contact with each other while camping off a tributary of the Little Wind River, known as Popoagie Creek. Scouts from each camp had spotted each other, and at first, an attempt was made by both sides at calling a temporary peace. Life on the frontier was already a difficult endeavor, one plagued by starvation, thirst, and the ever-present threat of storms, blizzards, tornadoes, flash floods, and animal attacks. This had been especially the case as of late, as the destruction of the buffalo herds that each tribe relied on was just beginning to see the initial iterations of the mass slaughter at the hands of American hunters that would see them driven to near extinction. Thus, both the Crow and Shoshone had seen fit to avoid conflict if possible. At first, a peace was brokered, but soon it was broken. The later accounts of each tribe hold conflicting views on who is responsible for breaching the truce. The Crow account holds that a number of their women and children had been attacked while visiting the Shoshone camp, when a number of Bannock warriors, allies of the Shoshone and another long-time enemy of the Crow, had visited the camp at the same time, and, seeing an opportunity to strike the vulnerable Crow, had killed or taken captive a number of them. The Shoshone account holds that it was, in fact, the Crow who had attacked their camp, and the Bannock warriors had come to their aid. In either case, the Crow had soon assembled their warriors, and battle lines were drawn between the Crow and the Shoshone and their Bannock allies. As was the custom in Plains warfare, both sides spent considerable time sizing up their opponents and attempting various acts of intimidation. For their part, the Shoshone had been hesitant to attack, as the Crow force had been larger than even their combined forces of themselves and the Bannock. But soon, a sizable number of Bannock warriors appeared, having been alerted by a few of their tribesmen who had gone back to their camp to request reinforcements. Now, believing his force to be comparable to the Crow, the Shoshone chief, an experienced warrior named Washakie, had begun to consider an all-out attack on the Crow and their camp. However, as the afternoon dragged into the evening, both sides eventually retired to their respective camps, as nighttime combat was all but impossible on the abysmal frontier. But the next morning, the battle lines were drawn again, and again, both groups spent considerable time in attempts to intimidate and insult each other. A Crow war chief named Big Shadow, or Big Robber, had ridden out into the no man's land between the two lines and called out to Washakie, calling him a squaw and an old woman who was too afraid to fight. Now adequately infuriated, Chief Washakie had raised his hand in order to give the signal for his warriors to charge. But before the order can be given, a crow arrow sails in from seemingly nowhere and pierces the chief's hand. Though the chief's signal had been compromised, his message to his warriors was clear: attack. What followed had been a sickeningly violent affair, with warriors on both sides falling to bullets, arrows, and war clubs. In the time-honored tradition of plains warfare, no quarter was given on either side to any fighting-aged male. By sunset of that day, the open expanse of the prairie on which the battle took place was soaked with blood and covered with dead and dying war horses. Eventually, the Shoshone and Bannock forces had managed to gain the advantage on the Crow, driving them up the creek and back towards their village. But the setting sun had once again prevented any further pursuit, and both parties had retired to their villages. For their part, the Shoshone and Bannock had now considered it to be an inevitability that the Crow would now leave their territory, having been soundly defeated. But the Crow did not leave, and the very next morning, the battle resumed again. Again, the two sides faced off, and again, well into the afternoon, charges and countercharges were made. Each engagement saw several warriors on each side fall, most in vicious hand-to-hand combat, as supplies of bullets had become more and more depleted over the prior day's fighting. This time, though, it was the Crow who managed to drive their enemy into retreat and up a nearby hill known as Black Mountain. The Shoshone and Bannock warriors had poured over the top of the steep hill, careening down the steep embankment on the other side. At the bottom of the embankment, the warriors attempted to regroup and reorganize their forces. During these moments of disarray, a lone warrior managed to slip off and ride back to the Shoshone and Bannock camp, warning them that they must leave immediately, as the Crow were now on their way. Now, a great panic seized hold of the village, as the shrieks and wails of the women drowned out the war cries of the battle happening only a few miles away. Instead of packing up and fleeing the village, many of the non-combatants armed themselves with whatever they could and took to the banks of the river in an attempt to hide themselves and their children. But the wailing and moaning of the terrified women was so loud that it reached the Crow warriors at Black Mountain. Though the Crow knew that the cries meant that the Shoshone and Bannock village was now vulnerable, the Shoshone and Bannock warriors had also heard the cries of their families, and now redoubled their efforts in fighting back the Crow. But, for all intents and purposes, it seemed that the Crow would soon overrun them. But the Shoshone chief, Washakie, undeterred and unfettered by their circumstances, had ridden his buckskin horse up and down the warriors' line, shouting instructions and encouragement to his men. Seeing their chief unmoved by the looming specter of certain defeat, the Shoshone and Bannock warriors had fought with even more resolve, and soon the attacking Crow line, now spread thinly over the ridges of Black Mountain, began to falter, and finally broke. With the Crow now on the retreat, Washakie and his warriors had pursued them, as the hunter had now become the hunted. The Crow warriors were soon overtaken, with their chief Big Robber and 30 other warriors falling to Shoshone and Bannock arrows and bullets. The Crow forces were soon split in two, with one contingent being cut down and killed quickly, and the other, comprising 23 young Crow warriors, being chased onto the prairie. Knowing that they were now caught in the open, these Crow made a mad dash for a large butte, the only sizable structure in the area. They had dismounted and scrambled to the top, as their Shoshone and Bannock pursuers made their own mad dash in an attempt to stop them. The Crow had made it to the top. However, now, they are caught in what all of them likely know is a losing fight. It is likely that many of them know that this very same butte was the place where a group of Blackfoot warriors had made their own last stand only a few years prior. In that battle, it had been the Crow and Shoshone, who were at that time allies, who had pursued and cut down the Blackfoot in their ongoing fight for the rights to the buffalo hunting lands of this territory. Now, caught in their own mortal fight against their one-time allies, the Crow remained steadfast in their resolve to fight to the bitter end. As charge after charge is made by the Shoshone and Bannock warriors, more and more of them fall under the Crow's volleys of arrows and bullets. The fight continues through the afternoon and into the night, with the Shoshone and Bannock staking out warriors all around the perimeter of the butte, hoping to lay siege to the Crow and force their surrender. For several days, the stalemate continues, with all hope of escape for the Crow now cut off. Finally, when no more movement is spotted from atop the butte, several Shoshone and Bannock warriors cautiously advance to the top. They finish off any Crow warriors still clinging to life and return down the steep incline with 23 fresh Crow scalps in tow. In latter accounts of this battle given by Shoshone witnesses, it is said that the mouths of several of these warriors returning from atop the butte are smeared with blood and gore. The witnesses assert that these warriors have in fact eaten the hearts of their Crow adversaries. In the end, it is estimated that some 49 Shoshone and Bannock warriors have fallen in the battle, with nearly 100 more wounded. The Crow have suffered comparable losses, with an estimated 103 of their warriors losing their lives in the battle, though other estimates hold that the actual number is roughly 53 warriors killed, with roughly twice that many wounded. Many Crow were also taken prisoner on this day, though in the typical fashion of the Plains tribes, many were either eventually returned to their people or adopted into the Shoshone tribe. Many years later, after all intertribal warfare on the Plains had finally ceased, the Crow and Shoshone would meet in a friendly visit. During this visit, a middle-aged Crow thought that she recognized one of her childhood friends amongst the Shoshone. She approached the woman and asked if she was in fact her childhood friend. Recognizing her long-lost companion, the woman burst into tears, saying that she was indeed. Through her tears, the woman said, quote, "Yes, I am that person. For a long time, I yearned to see my family and friends, but now I have children of my own and can never leave them to go back and live amongst my own people." She also informed her Crow friend that her younger brother, who had also been taken by the Shoshone, was in fact still alive, now a full-fledged warrior with a family of his own. Though time would indeed heal the wounds between the Crow, the Shoshone, and the Bannock people, the impact of this battle would be long remembered between all three tribes. To the Crow, the butte where their warriors made their last stand was henceforth known as the Place of Mourning, a testament to the great sorrow and irreparable losses to their people on that day. To the Shoshone and Bannock peoples, this site would be known for generations to come as Crow Heart Butte. Whether this moniker is a testament to the fortitude of their enemies or a reference to the alleged eating of the fallen warrior's heart is a matter of debate amongst experts. In either case, this battle between sworn enemies is but one example of the countless, ruthless instances of combat, raiding, and ambush that abound in the history of the native peoples of the Plains in their constant fight for dominance and survival. But the many stories of those battles, which ranged from Canada to Mexico, are, for tonight, other stories for other times. Southern Montana, 1820. In the hue of the early morning light, a village of the mighty Crow tribe stirs in apprehension of an attack that is soon to come. Their chief, an esteemed veteran warrior named Longhair, surveys the surrounding area, replete with hills and thick timber, looking for any signs of the enemy that lurk somewhere outside the confines of the village. They have come here, to this area just south of the Yellowstone River, in order to make a seasonal headquarters of sorts, in which hunters from the tribe can venture out onto the plains and return with their bounties without requiring their families to leave the relative safety of this slightly more wooded and hilly area. Here on the high plains, the fight for survival is one waged not only against privation and hunger, but against other tribes as well. Though, in these early decades of the 19th century, incursion from Americans and Europeans has been a constant for decades, the primary opponent the Crow have waged war on for years now is their northern and easterly neighbors, the Sioux and Cheyenne. The year prior to this, in 1819, the Crow had suffered a devastating defeat not far from here at the hands of the allied forces of Sioux and Cheyenne, themselves having banded together against the Crows in interest of driving out their mutual enemy. The day prior to this, a band of Crow warriors from this village had ventured out into the wilds in search of their hated enemies, but in a sickening twist of fate, had unknowingly passed a band of Sioux and Cheyenne in the area. That band of Sioux and Cheyenne are themselves intent on attacking this village of Crow. Late in the evening, a scout had come rushing into the Crow village, his head bloodied from an encounter with the Sioux and Cheyenne. The scout warned the village that the war party was on its way, and all who could be convinced to flee and take cover in the surrounding landscape did so immediately. Those who remained worked feverishly to construct timbered breastworks along the village perimeter, in an attempt to solidify any cover for themselves that they can. Chief Longhair has stayed in the village, and now he and only a few of the remaining Crow warriors, mostly old men and teenagers, face the coming onslaught. Only a few miles away, the party of Sioux and Cheyenne warriors, under the command of a Cheyenne war chief named Ice, makes their way towards the Crow village. The Cheyenne, in particular, are noted for their various warrior societies, composed of warriors who adhere to certain traditions, oaths, modes of behavior, and dress. Ice, a veteran warrior, belongs to perhaps the most curious group among these, a cohort of warriors known as the Contrary Society. Though all manner of extraordinary claims surround this mysterious group, including that they walk backwards and say no when they mean yes, it is true that they wear their war headdresses backwards. In Ice's case, this manifests in the form of a prairie dog skin, worn flapping down over his forehead. Cloaked in only moccasins and a breechclout, he is otherwise painted completely red, in the style of the Contrary Society. He rides atop his trusted war pony, also painted red. In his left hand, covered in a wolf-hide sheath, Ice carries what is known as the Thunderbow Lance, an item considered to carry powerful medicine for making war. Like a pack of wolves on the hunt, the party of warriors skulks their way quietly through the countryside, scarcely making a sound. Their scouts have spotted the Crow village, seemingly oblivious to their presence, and now, the Sioux and Cheyenne warriors, burning for glory and vengeance against their hated enemies, make their way towards the target, seeking to satiate their hunger for respect and revenge. Finally, the Sioux and Cheyenne warriors crest the hill overlooking Longhair's village. There is, however, no swift charge to take the Crow by surprise. Instead, a small contingent of Crow villagers first notice a line of enemy warriors forming on the ridge above their village. Quickly, a cry goes out for the men to arm themselves and for the women and children to take cover. Still, though, Ice and his warriors, themselves adorned and painted according to their respective warrior societies, only watch on, silently observing the chaos unfold below them with a sense of immense satisfaction. Then, suddenly, with a barely discernible flick of his left wrist, Ice unsheathes the Thunderbow Lance. A moment later, an utter cacophony rises up from all the Sioux and Cheyenne warriors, as Ice raises the lance high above his head. This signals the sacred arrow priest, a Cheyenne man named Dogface Medicine Man, to carry out the ceremony of the sacred arrows. This is done with the medicine man offering up the traditional incantations in an unhurried, business-like fashion. Meanwhile, the Crow villagers scramble to take cover behind the ad hoc breastworks they had constructed the previous day. Chief Longhair directs his few warriors to take their places, as the women ready their children to make a run into the woods should all seem lost. What is at stake is known to all, young and old. Plains warfare is not for the faint of heart. with virtually all fighting-age males, especially those unfortunate enough to be captured alive, being killed without question. The women and children lucky enough to survive the attack would find their old lives to be distant memories, as their best hope for the remainder of their lives would be to avoid abject servitude by being adopted into their captor's tribe. This long-standing enmity was born out of the brutal nature of the struggle to survive in these harsh environs, and fomented by the necessity of war as a means of social mobility within warrior cultures. Raids like these are not only commonplace, but a critical component of societal structure among many Plains tribes. Still, the visceral, bloody nature of raiding, even in the unforgiving world of the High Plains, seldom, if ever, becomes a banal experience for any of those involved. Now, as the horrified screams of the women and children lilt upwards towards his position on the hill, Ice again raises the thunderbow lance in his left hand, signaling his warriors to be ready to charge. There is still, however, one point of unfinished business, a matter of honor that Ice must fulfill before he and his men can strike the Crow village. A veteran Cheyenne warrior named Two Twists, his hair worn in 2 long braids, rides forward to the front of the line. He, too, is covered in war paint and carries a large rawhide shield on his left arm. In his right hand, he carries a large steel Spanish saber. Two Twists has made a vow to his grandfather, a respected Cheyenne chief named Red Painted Robe, that he would avenge the loss of the old man's beloved son to the Crows the year prior by being the first and only warrior to broach the perimeter of the next Crow village he and his cohorts were able to find. Now, in keeping with his vow, Two Twists raises his saber high above his head, begins to sing his death song, and urges his war pony forwards towards the Crow village at a full gallop. To the whoops and cheers of his Sioux and Cheyenne comrades, Two Twists bears down upon the Crow breastworks, now the lone rider in the no-man's land between the Sioux and Cheyenne on the top of the hill and the Crow village at the bottom. As he comes within range of the Crow village, a hailstorm of bullets and arrows fired by the beleaguered force of aged men and young defenders fly all around him. Yet, miraculously, Two Twists remains untouched as he charges forward undaunted, seeming only to gain speed with his downhill trajectory. In mere seconds, Two Twists' pony jumps the timbered breastworks of the Crow, situating him, alone, squarely in the middle of a group of dozens of Crow villagers. He rides through the crowd and, still at top speed, decapitates an unfortunate lone Crow warrior he manages to separate from the crowd. With his mount, his weapon, and his own body now covered in blood, he wheels his horse around and, again jumping the Crow fortifications, makes a mad, victorious dash back towards the cheering Sioux and Cheyenne lines. Two Twists arrives safely back to the lines of his tribesmen, as they exhort his bravery with shrill cries and whoops of admiration. Now wide-eyed and coursing with adrenaline, Two Twists pauses only momentarily to let his horse catch its breath before again thumping his moccasined feet into the animal's ribs, beginning yet another one-man charge. Again, he charges, saber held aloft, and again crests the defenses of the Crow. But this time, Chief Longhair and the desperate Crow defenders meet him by swarming upon his horse and smothering the animal's progress before managing to unseat Two Twists and pull him to the ground. He then disappears under a wave of Crow fists and clubs. Now, Ice and his comrades in the Sioux and Cheyenne, seeing his plight, let loose cries of rage that resound through the surrounding hills. Ice now raises the thunderbow lance and then lowers it, pointing squarely at the Crow village. The instant this signal is given, the Sioux and Cheyenne warriors make their charge, their horses thundering towards the diminutive Crow defenses. Again, Chief Longhair and his contingent of teenagers and elderly men launch a volley of musket fires and arrows at their attackers. But, again, their efforts make little effect, as the Sioux and Cheyenne pour over and tear down the Crow defensive works, killing any fighting-age male or resisting Crow in their path. The Crows now split into several separate groups, which huddle together in defense and make a last-ditch effort to attempt to get their women and children to safety. One of these groups, with Chief Longhair in command, manages to make their way to the outskirts of the village, then begins to make a desperate sprint for the hills. Chief Longhair and the remaining warriors in this group make a heartened stand against the small group of Sioux and Cheyenne who break off from the village to attack them, and the chief and this group are in fact able to slip away into the cover of the timber. Unfortunately for the Crow remaining in the village, there is now no chance of escape, and they are left to draw the full ire of their Sioux and Cheyenne attackers. As the bodies of their friends and kinsmen are scalped, the women and children are gathered up and taken prisoner. Some of the elderly women are sent away and told to find their people and report to them what has taken place here. One of these women, completely blind, begs for the release of her daughter, who she says acts as her only helper in life. In a show of mercy, the woman's daughter is freed and allowed to accompany her mother on their flight. The Crow men who have been captured, however, are shown no such clemency. To a man, they are all put to death at the end of lances and clubs, as their friends and families helplessly watch on. Then, after the Crow village is looted, the captives are secured, and the trophies of war properly claimed by each warrior, Ice and his band of warriors disappear over the hill, with the only trace of the Crow village now being the empty shells of its lodges and the weeping and lamentations of the prisoners. Great glory has been won this day, perhaps most prominently by Two Twists, who had in fact managed to fight his way out of the swarm of Crow defenders and carry on the attack with his fellow warriors. He will go on to become not only a legendary warrior, but a revered chief. Meanwhile, Chief Longhair and his band of survivors will indeed, in the next few days, find and rejoin the band of warriors that had left their village in search of the very Sioux and Cheyenne who had attacked. The torrent of grief and sorrow that must have been unleashed at the news of the attack and the resulting devastation can only be imagined, though its exact recollections will go unrecorded. What will be remembered, however, is the storm of violence that is about to be unleashed, at levels never before seen by either faction, between the Crow and the allied forces of the Sioux and Cheyenne. But the many tales of the brutal battles that will unfold in the wake of this bloody affair between age-old enemies on North America's high plains are, for tonight, other stories for other times.
Thank you again for joining us on this episode of History at the OK Corral. Be sure to click the like button, share this episode with a friend, and become a subscriber. Also, if you'd like to support our work and gain early access to episodes as well as ad-free viewing, you can become a member of this channel by clicking on the join button down below. Also, be sure to follow us on TikTok and Instagram and subscribe to our newsletter. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time on History at the OK Corral, home of history's greatest shootouts and showdowns.